Hello. Come on now. I see all you beautiful people out there. You can do better than that. Hello. All right. That sounds more like it. Is everybody having a good time? Okay. Well, we are so excited to have all of you here. And thanks for coming out on this pretty typical May Olympia Northwest evening. And a very, very special thanks to the presenting sponsor, Heritage Bank, for its great contribution. So let's give it up for Heritage Bank, okay? Tonight, we are here to celebrate philanthropy and the inspiring legacy of the philanthropist, Mr. Paul Newman. But before getting to Paul's remarkable story, there are three things I wanted to share with you. Number one, our family's connectivity to the Community Foundation. Secondly, a brief overview of the Community Foundation. And thirdly, some examples of nonprofits who have benefited from receiving funds from the Community Foundation. So number one, our family relationship with the Community Foundation. My wife, girlfriend, and best friend, Marcia Tadana Long, and I have been associated with the Community Foundation for approximately 15 years, believe it or not. We've lived here in Olympia for about 40 years. And you're right, Marcia and I came when we were about 13, 14 years old. And we were, pretty fast starters. Our Learning Seed Foundation is administered by the Community Foundation. And our foundation provides scholarships to graduating high school seniors, primarily students of color, to go to college, continuing college, and to graduate and move into the employment arena. And the Community Foundation has done a remarkable job in working with us to achieve that specific goal. Marcia, I might add, served on the board of directors of the Community Foundation. And actually, I was initially being recruited by the Community Foundation, and then they met Marcia and they kicked me to the curb. And they made a very good decision. She served on the board for over a decade and also was chair of the board. And I think Norma and the staff and her colleagues would agree that she did indeed serve with distinction. Now, the Learning Seed Foundation is one of not 50, not 60, not 70, but 90 funds that are administered by the Community Foundation. So given our extensive, productive, and enjoyable experience with the Community Foundation, it's a real honor and humbling experience for me and Marcia to be here with you tonight. Number two, let's talk a little bit about the Community Foundation, just a little bit more. The work of the foundation is primarily accomplished through scholarships to promising young people and grants to local nonprofits. The foundation serves 3 counties, Lewis, Mason, and Thurston. The Community Foundation benefits a wide range of local level initiatives and programs, ranging from arts and culture, environmental issues, health and human services, education, economic development, and nonprofit sustainability. Those of you who attended our pre-program reception hopefully had a chance to meet some of the foundation local grantees. And 6 local nonprofits have benefited recently from funds from the Community Foundation, and those local nonprofits have just come on stage, and I will be introducing them post haste. But I know it's going to be difficult because they all provide outstanding services and they're wonderful people, but if you could hold your applause until I introduce everyone, that would be most appreciated. We'll start with the Chehalis River Basin Land Trust. This trust works to preserve the natural environment and to restore the ecological sensitive habitat. Tonight, representatives are Janet Strong and Jan Robinson. Would you please step forward and be recognized? Okay, you guys are doing good. Not on the applause. Very good. Okay. Might be a little bonus for you, okay? From Mason County, housing options for students in transition. This leading, groundbreaking initiative has increased high school graduation rates as well as post-secondary education. And with us tonight is the executive director, Kim Reinhardt, and two of the students who have been quite successful, Kyle Davis and Jerica Northness. Okay, well, 2 for 2. From Thurston County's Delphi Valley is Nature Nurtures Farm. This program allows young people to work and to utilize animals in teaching responsibility and sensitivity and inspiring hope. The co-founders are the Peters sisters, Nicole and Julie. And they are, I understand, very good goat wranglers. And speaking of goats, on behalf of, I believe, Emma and Trillam, they said, nah. I know, corny, but I just, couldn't pass it up. Serving seniors like me and Bill Gavin and Don Rose in both Thurston and Mason counties, I'm pleased to announce is a unique program concerned for animals and senior services for South Sound. This program provides Meals on Wheels to clients in providing care for their companion animals. Tonight's representatives are Sandy and Terry Thacker with their service Pomeranian, Zoe, as well as Margie Bernatz. And we also have Chipper. Okay, Chipper, hey, Chipper wants to play. Okay, Chipper, you're a last-minute entrant, so don't, show off too much. Okay, we're coming home now. Lastly, the beautiful music that you heard earlier in the lobby was provided by gifted students with the Orchestra of Greater Olympia. Tonight's trio featured 2 violinists, Evan Hopper and his brother Seth, and we'll continue in the V category with the viola player, and that's Lindsay Lampin. Their ensemble coordinator is Mary Jo Rydholm. Okay, now we can do it. Yeah. Now, for the really serious fun. You are about to learn that philanthropy is serious fun. Paul Newman, the original Mr. Cool, was an American Idol and a winning race car driver. I'm proud to say it, I don't have a problem, and quite easy on the eye. Very handsome guy. Oh, yeah, okay, give it up for Paul. He's a bad boy. Paul was an American film idol and winning race car driver. Both of those things sound like fun, but that's not really where he would ultimately discover his greatest joy. That story will further unfold this evening, and you will find out what was Paul's ultimate calling. Mr. Newman described philanthropy as love for humankind and the practice of charity. Not phrases related to charity, not plaudits related to charity, not promises related to charity, but practices, action, moving forward. And in fact, I just share one little story with you that will hopefully bring my point home a little more so. And that is, I try to stay organized and put my different lists and priorities together and color code them and lay them out in a very meticulous way. And I had done this with items A, B, and C, hot items, etc. And my wife, Marcia, after seeing my list for a couple of days, said, "Merritt, you've done a great job in putting your list together, but there's one small something you need to do. You need to do something with it." Okay, so having a belief, a thought, a wish toward a particular charity is one thing, but we want to try to encourage that next action step. And to take us further down that road, I'm going to introduce our two big hitters of the night. First, I'm going to introduce Miss Norma Schuiteman. And at this point, the curtain should be coming up. There we go. Voila. Norma is the president and CEO of the Community Foundation of South Puget Sound and shares much of Paul's philosophy. She believes steadfastly that everyone can be a philanthropist, and she has led the Community Foundation with that belief for the past 12 years. In fact, earlier I was chatting with Norma, and I said, Norma, Marcia and I remember your our alpha moment when you were being introduced at the Indian Summer 12 years ago. And our fund has been a part of the Community Foundation for 15 years. So I said to Norma that hopefully with her Omega moment, we will continue to be with her. Norma is a very multidimensional person. She has been a high school teacher, a coach, a hospital executive team member, and served as a consultant to over 35 Midwestern community foundations. Today, as the head of our community foundation, Norma is inspired by helping donors that put their values into action through their philanthropic gifts. One other something that I have learned, not part of the script, sorry, Norma, but Norma is such an active listener. She really listens to you as opposed to waiting to talk. And I say that because she's a great therapist. I have coffee with her, and I always feel so much better. So, Norma, you have an additional career possibility there, okay? I say that with love and respect. With Norma is tonight very special guest, Robert Forrester, President and CEO of Newman's Own Foundation and Executive Chairman of Newman's Own Incorporated. Bob was Paul's friend and philanthropic advisor. He was a person Paul obviously had tremendous amount of trust and confidence to become the first president of Newman's Own Foundation in 2005. His primary role was to ensure that Paul's two core principles would continue after his passing. Those principles are: quality will always triumph over the bottom line, and all profits to charity. Bob's career spans 45 years of work in the philanthropic sectors across the globe. As Norma and I was visiting, I had an opportunity to meet and chat with Bob, and three things impressed me about him after we had finished visiting. Number one, it's clear to me he is very good and skilled at forming strategic alliances and partnerships in carrying out his mission. And secondly, he's a very astute business person. And thirdly, he believes in balancing profitability with responsibility. In fact, his belief is that all profits should go to the shareholders, those shareholders being people in need, which run the gamut of the kinds of activities and services that his foundation support. So those few minutes with him has been a real joy and enlightenment for me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now for our feature presentation, the Paul Newman story and the importance of philanthropy in America today. I gratefully turn the stage over to Norma and Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, we're so glad that you came today. It's been wonderful being able to visit with you for a while before the program. It's been a joy working with your staff as we prep for today, and we're just grateful for the work that you do, and we're really looking forward to, in my mind, kind of peeking behind the curtain a little bit to learn more about a person that many of us have followed for years. You run a successful, widely respected organization, and we're really hoping to learn more about how philanthropy is practiced, that love of humankind that Paul believes so deeply in. So welcome.
Thank you.
One of the questions, that is really on my mind is, how did you get to know Paul? What was that first piece of connectivity that happened?
Well, before I answer that question, I just have to tell you people, I hope you know you live in the most beautiful part of the world. This is just splendid. I don't see how you get any work done here. This is beyond me. It's a privilege to be with you, and it's really a privilege to come into a real community, not just a city. I met Paul. We both lived in Connecticut, which is about the size of one of your counties here. But I got a call one day from a mutual friend who asked me to visit Paul about an issue he was dealing with philanthropically. It was our first children's camp that we were building overseas. Excuse me, a little congestion. So I got in my car, drove down to Westport, Connecticut, where he lived, drove on his property. He's lived in the same home for 50 years by the time he passed away. Went up, knocked on the door, it opened. I said, "I'm Bob Forrester." He said, "Well, I'm Paul Newman." And I literally almost said, "Of course you are. Who else could you possibly be?" and he asked me, at that point, he said, "Would you like a beer?" By the way, it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was okay. And I, being a little bit polite, I said, "No, thanks." And he said, "Well, the hell with you. Come on in anyway." And so as he turned away, I said, "I'll have the beer with you." And we sat down and we just talked. We didn't really even talk about why I was there. And we just became friends. It was also just almost, for me, I could never think of Paul as a celebrity. I had to put that out of my mind very quickly. And then we found we shared a lot in common, adolescent sense of humor. He taught me things like deep sea fishing is a code for drinking beer and eating ice cream and taking naps, and got me into racing and other things. And we just became very close friends. And it was that point in Paul's life where he was beginning to really reflect more on his life. And the one thing that really unified his life was his interest in what we call philanthropy. It's just, his craft, his job was acting, his passion was racing. He loved his family and friends, but his real heart was in just doing what little bit he could to help make our world a better place. And I was sort of in the same place.
And so then, over the years, that friendship deepened. Did you ever have a working relationship with him during those times at all, or not?
I never did. In fact, I had my own business. I had a very successful consulting business in the nonprofit philanthropic sector, which I began to spend so much time with Paul that business was not doing well. But it was such a privilege to work with him, and but not as he was my friend. I could not work with him for pay. And when he asked me to be the president of the foundation, we never talked about that. And then one day his business manager called and said, Paul wants to pay you. And I said, well, I won't accept that. And he said, well, you don't have any choice. And so that's when I began to work at the foundation. I still had my company, and it slowly disappeared over time. But you know, for me, in the business I've been in since I got out of the military, I was saying to someone earlier this evening, it would be sort of the equivalent of an opera singer going on La Scala or the Met, to be in the world of nonprofits and then have the privilege of being associated with the Newman Zone is the major league. It is the pinnacle of doing things. So I would have done it for free.
Well, thanks. We'd like to come back to learning more about Paul as we go forward, but just that initial, you're joining the foundation, can you just describe when you were brought in, were you the first staff person? Was there someone already there?
When Paul was alive, he started Newman Zone. As Mary pointed out, he had two principles. One was quality would trump profits, the other give it all away. Nobody thought that would work, but the money, everything, he owned everything. So it would go to him and then he would donate it. He didn't have a car on the payroll, didn't take compensation. But as he used to say, when his spaghetti sauce began to outgross his movie revenues, he began to have to pay more tax on money he wanted to give away. But that really didn't compel him to start the foundation. What really did is when I spoke with him, I said, Paul, what you really need to do is think about starting this in your lifetime so you can see how it's operating. You can see the people. You can get rid of the people if you wish. But I've seen too many cases where people don't do it in their lifetime. Their estates end up someplace else and they would be disappointed, if you will. So Paul did, when he was running the company just as an individual or, you know, his own sole owner, he did hire a person in 1984. She is still with us. I think I shared with you, maybe it wasn't you, but our oldest employee at Newman Zone is 99 years old. He will be in June. And he came and asked me for a raise last year. I figured I was in safe territory, but what I actually did is I gave him a chutzpah bonus. I said, you get it. But that's a Hotchner who still works with us and does the legends and all of that. And so Pam Pape started working in '84. She continues as my very trusted counselor. And but I was the first person to be the head of the foundation. So when we began the foundation in 2005, Paul was the chairman and CEO. I was the president and COO. And Paul was not good in meetings, so every board meeting would start with, I would say to Paul, do you want me to run the meeting? He told me, that's a great idea, you run the meeting. And our meetings were really strange meetings. In the early days before the foundation, the way the minutes got written, we were a private company, no foundation at that point. And I was on the board, is that whoever lost at ping pong had to write the minutes.
Oh, dear.
True story.
Well, maybe we could think about that.
Well, you know, one of the things that we have inside Newman Zone is really important to Paul and is to all of us. If you're not having some fun at what you're doing, re-examine it. So we may have gone a little too far in that occasionally, but we set a standard.
So as we're thinking about Paul, we would like to show a short video. And in the beginning of this, it talks a little bit about Paul's experience in the Navy, and I'd like to come back to that after the video and talk with you, particularly about how, as you've gotten to know Paul, how you saw that his experience in the Navy early in his life was formative for him and much of his philosophy.
Sure.
So let's watch that short video at this point.
Paul had a profound understanding. It was inside him. You know, he didn't sit around and ponder this, that everybody was the same, and circumstances tended to make a difference. Paul enlisted in the Second World War, 17 years old, I think, and a big part of his squadron got deployed to the Bunker Hill. His pilot could not fly, and he was grounded. 2-3 days later, before Paul and his pilot could join up, Bunker Hill was hit by 2 kamikazes, and I think the loss of life was 384 people, including everybody in Paul's squadron. And I think that was a humbling experience to him. I mean, he told me, how can you ever think of yourself as being special? You know, you're just lucky. Well known as an Oscar-winning actor, record-holding race car driver, a food company executive, and philanthropist. Is there any common thread that holds it all together?
I'm a great believer in luck and the extraordinary role that plays in all of our lives. Good luck, bad luck, medium luck. And my interest in philanthropy is kind of a composite picture of all of that. I was very lucky just because I happened to look the right way for motion picture. Played a huge part in what I was able to accomplish, at least when I first got started.
It's hard to think of a celebrity product that launched and was successful.
We originally were just going to put this in delicatessen, the little boutique shops and everything, and one of the owners of a huge supermarket said, the only way you're going to sell this stuff is to put your face on the label.
Your face.
I said, well, there's not much chance of that. And once we decided that that's what we wanted to do, we decided we'd give the money away.
Thank you. We are kind of witness to a mini miracle here.
Some of these kids spend 6 months in hospital, and the only time that they get a chance to really go someplace and be with kids where it's normal not to be well, and they can raise a little hell and behave badly and do it all together, which is the joy of it. There's a whole lot of serious fun going on. I always come back to this basic equation of luck.
But it's not luck that made you combine it with a brilliant idea that you stuck by for 25 years.
Paul said once, you know, philanthropy is about the love of humankind. Don't make it overly complicated.
So the love of humankind, don't make it too complicated.
Right.
But something started back in during the World War II.
Well, I have to think it was there before. I think
Okay.
the I was, as you know, an officer in Vietnam, and so we shared some of the experience of what it means to be in those situations. But before I go into that, something I really have to share is that if Paul Newman were alive today and he knew I was doing this, he'd kick my butt right out of here.
Okay.
Because Paul, he was a man of such true, authentic humility. It's hard to believe, and he never thought himself special, and he would not. You know, I do this now because I think Paul is not Paul the celebrity, but what Newman's own is and how he went about it is really very special in its authenticity. So if I can promote philanthropy, or if I can help the children you saw up here, then I'm good with. You know, he can't get me now, I don't think. So, although looking up at him there, I was getting a little weirded out.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, you know, what is that? You know, Paul had this in the Second World War. I think it was explained. He was a man who had many facets, and he had a very curious intellect. And again, I think one of the reasons we got along, we just talked about things, you know, that, you know, wonderful things to talk about, like what's it all about, that type of stuff. And so he was reflecting on, you know, what separates, what makes differences in people. And the Second World War, when he was actually, the way he ended up where he is the man who got into movies because of his great blue eyes, and some other turned out to be colorblind and couldn't be a pilot. So he ended up being a radio gunnerman on an Avenger torpedo bomber, and the rest of it is up there, and his pilot just happened to get grounded that day. And you know, in a situation like that, that's all that's separating you from the circumstance of bad luck is luck. You can call it many different things. He just chose that word. He would always say that he was lucky to have been born in America and all the opportunities that afforded. He was, you know, if he had been born, let's say, in Papua New Guinea, maybe he could have had a dugout canoe concession or something, but that's all those circumstances afforded. And he just happened to look right for the movies. Now, he went somewhere with those opportunities. He's also, you know, he was very aware of this. He used to say to me, he said, Forrester, this is how he would talk. He said, Forrester, when I croak, he either used croak or conk, not omega, by the way, merit wherever you are, but he said, I want you to put on my tombstone, here lies Paul Newman, his eyes turn brown. But he just understood. So it was that idea that in his life and other people's lives, the balance of this good fortune can be beneficent. In other people's lives, it's not so much. Not the luck of the lottery, but the luck of circumstance, the luck of his pilot being grounded on the day everybody else flew, and he certainly would have been killed in that kamikaze raid. So, you know, what could you call a child who has cancer other than bad luck? You know, born into poverty, that wasn't your doing. You know, any of these circumstances. So that was the motivating factor, and he wouldn't dwell on it much. I mean, in fact, if somebody came up and said, "Why are you so generous?" the first thing he would do is give you a very curious look at it. Why do you even have to ask such a question? It's not special. You know, we all have the opportunity to do something to help make our world a better place, share our good fortune with those less fortunate. And that's the story.
That was it.
Yeah, that was it.
Well, what I would say, what a privilege to be able to be in that environment, you know, to get a sense of that humility when the world around was so taken with his charm and his great acting and all of those things that we get intrigued with in our society. So that is really...
He did know how to be a celebrity when it served his purpose, like if he was caught speeding. And as a race driver he was. I was with him once, and he always had his sunglasses, and the trooper came over, and he came over and Paul took off his glasses and the state trooper looked at him and said, "My wife will kill me," and turned around and walked away. So he knew how to use it when it was he needed, you know. But mostly, I mean, he just anybody here, he would have loved to have been here because he just liked being with real people, and he would like to go out and have a beer with you and hang out. It's just what he was.
Just what he was.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a perspective that if you weren't here telling us that, we wouldn't have that view of him, because he has a presence and a suave that
He had all of those.
was tremendously engaging and always emitted a piece of him that I think was just so attractive that you might not even think that there was anything deeper there, because we just aren't trained to go that way when we have celebrities unnecessarily. So you have the privilege of being able to hold on to and to bring forward the term that we use a lot with legacy.
Right.
How do you think about that now?
Well, again, I said up there that it's not complicated. We try to keep it simple. So when people ask me about things like that, I tell them that my promise to Paul, and I'm no longer sure I actually said this to him or not, but it's what I've been saying, is that if you come back 10 years, if you go before me, you come back 10 years later, you walk in the room, you won't know the people most likely, and you may not even know what they're talking about, but it'll feel right to you. So implicit in that are two promises. One is a very competitive business space that we're in. We still have to be here as a business. You can't come back 10 years from now if we haven't succeeded at business. But on top of that, the values, the way we think about things would be the same. So my role inside Newman's Own is more as I get the CEO titles because if somebody has to serve papers on us, I get them and type of thing. But I really think of myself more as a steward and trying to connect that past through the present to the future as we go through change and just, you know, Paul was, he did not leave. Some days I really am upset with him. He never left a book that says, here's what you should do. Here's how I want decisions to be made. His philosophy was, if I'm not going to be there in the future, I have no right or there's no reason why I should be telling people what to do. So we constantly take these core values and try to think about them, go back and touch, what does quality trump profit mean? It's not just the quality of our food ingredients, it's the quality of our thinking about ourselves and other people. We have another, I was telling Norma that in Paul's office, he had a sign that said, if I had a plan, I would have been screwed. And that's now in our board. Yeah, believe me, you know. Remember the old circus parades? The guy behind the elephant with the broom. That was me. When you have somebody with that kind of philosophy, but he changed that to creative chaos. That's another value. And you say, well, what is that? Well, creative chaos. He said, well, that's what you, as an actor, when the curtain goes up, what you see is a function of everybody voicing an opinion. Good ideas, bad ideas, the guy bringing coffee, the lighting guy, the actors, the directors. So that's another value inside Newman's Own which is not easy when you're running a company that wants to kind of make orderly decisions. Just constantly say, no, everybody gets a voice in it. So we just kind of work what used to be natural because we grew up with Paul, work that into the system going forward with the younger people that we've hired. And it's working well so far. I haven't been thrown out. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a sign. I think that's positive.
Yeah,
yes,
I think so.
Yes. So as you're going about your work, in this country and around the world, how do you talk about that piece of luck in the communities that you come into? Because you meet people in all sorts of different circumstances. So how does that play out as you move around?
Well, you mean from our grant-making
Yes.
side? Yeah, well, having spent my career in the philanthropic field with nonprofits, I just have such great respect for people in that world. You know, I know that people working in nonprofits are passionate, committed, hardworking, and a lot smarter than I am about what their mission is, whether it's environment, children, or whatever. So we are a very non-prescriptive foundation. We don't try to impose ourselves on organizations thinking up what the program should be. But we have very large lenses that we look through to try to think about how do we deal with this. So one of the things we do in our grant making is that we look for organizations that we can take a risk with. We're nimble. Paul was very spontaneous in his giving. We're not quite as spontaneous because as a foundation we need to do due diligence and other things. But we can make fast decisions, we can take big risks, which I think is important for us to do. You know, the nonprofit sector is like the R&D of society. A lot of things, you saw it here tonight. We always want to put a face to what we're doing. So even if what we're funding doesn't go on to, you know, prove some greater point, that beneficiary, you know, has somehow benefited, that child, that whatever the case may be where our program is going. You know, we also, it's certainly we can never meet with the relatively small amount of money we have. We can't meet all of the needs and the interests. We do try to leverage what we do through use of our brand and convening. You know, the nonprofit community is also, as you know very well, Norma, gets very fractured. And like in the space of veterans, there are 68,000 that they've been able to count, NGOs trying to work in that area and not talking to one another very much. So we'll try to help do that to bring things together. I'm not sure if that's responsive, but we still depend a great deal on our intuition, and we try to invest in people, ultimately.
And what would the world be like if we tried to run a spaghetti business that way and had 68,000 spaghetti sauces or pizza sauces or whatever? It just doesn't get the job done.
I'm all in favor of just having one. Spaghetti sauce.
That's good. And we applaud you for that one. Okay. We're happy about that. So as you've been working with the foundation over the last 10 years, 10 or 11 years now, what have been your, what has been your greatest satisfaction?
Well, I have to say this. Yesterday I was at the Seattle Children's Hospital, which we've supported over the years. And there's no greater satisfaction for me. I went in there to give them a grant check. There were families. It was in the mitochondrial disease clinic, which is a shattering disease for anybody to have. It's, you know, it's a genetic condition and manifests in very complex ways. But the parents were there with some of their children, and their children had actually been campers at our camp. So whether it's those children being with them and their parents, or being in these little girls you saw up there, with the largest slum in Africa where I go, in Kibera, and that's my greatest satisfaction. That's what keeps the engine running, is to really say, you know, you can make a difference. It doesn't take a great deal. I mean, we've come to think, unfortunately, in our country, that everything has to be big to make an impact. It doesn't. I mean, and that's what gives me the greatest satisfaction. That, you know, and I have the great privilege, both in my consulting firm and through Newman's Own, to see the best of people. So, you know, you can read the paper and just be pessimistic. I can too, but then I go out and meet these people and say, no, there's a lot of good going on out there. So that's it. Pretty ethereal.
So just I wanted to ask you about the nature of the piece of the philanthropic sector today. A lot of foundations are really starting to narrow their focus and leaving out organizations or areas of work that they may have had a long history of funding. Newman's Own, not unlike the Community Foundation model, has funded, the environment over the years and youth and health and human services and veterans. And I'm wondering how you see that playing out. Do you see yourself becoming more focused or staying a broader lens through which you look at the
Yeah,
world?
well, I'm there, certainly. It's not going to become more focused. We're not, again, having worked in the field, having seen the wonder of what goes on, and we certainly carve out these big lenses that we look through. There are 4 of them. One is just encouraging philanthropy as much as we can. Another is children with life-limiting conditions. Another one is nutrition, which I must say, it's here, is pretty bold for a company that makes Alfredo sauce. But we're a little different than other folks. And then the final one is empowerment, which is not a political statement. It's a statement of helping to reduce the barriers that might stand, circumstantial barriers between a person and their ability to go to their potential, whether it's poverty, whether it's some kind of physical disability, whether it's an intellectual challenge, whatever. Whether they do that or not doesn't matter. So that allows us to bring a lot in under that. And we're not really terribly interested in metrics. Well, I mean, how do you judge the metric of a college or a university? Just give you one example. And we tend to do it by tests. Well, I believe very strongly you do it by what those people are doing 20, 30 years later in their lives, what they've accomplished. So we're a little bit kind of by ourselves these days, because people do think, particularly people newly getting into the big philanthropic space, that somehow they have to prove a point, solve a problem, and measure it quickly. And they're generous and they're fine. We're just different. And I want to stay that way, because I think we probably have proven as many points as they have just by being simple and being a risk taker. And I hope, like Paul, I can only hope that I share enough of these values so when I'm no longer there, the thinking continues.
It sounds like that kind of a way of thinking of doing business for nonprofits would be freeing for them, to give them more space to be creative and not afraid as much.
Exactly. Well, also that the typical relationship between a funder and a fund seeker, having been a development officer, is you're awake 2 nights before you're going to a foundation. You're putting on your best clothes. You're rehearsing. Your hands are sweaty and everything. That's just the wrong relationship. That's not what philanthropy is all about. At least, again, our view. So it's kind of surprising, because I go around the world thanking our grantees. Well, what are you talking about? Well, no, thank you for what you're doing. If more people in the space, corporations and others, thought that way, I think things would change dramatically. I really do.
And I would agree, and I really appreciate and say thank you for that general spirit. And I'm just going to make an editorial comment here to the audience. I recommended to Bob that he look up the website Nonprofits with Balls.
Yeah.
And if you, many of you, know that, and if you really want to have a good glimpse into the nonprofit sector, both the good, bad, and the things to be improved, that's a really great space to learn about it. And some of what you're talking is really what this gentleman says, are those steps that would make the nonprofit sector a safer, better, more productive place to be. So enough of my parenthetical comment. Did you want to say anything?
No, it's just, well, yes, I guess. I was just thinking when you were speaking, this whole nonprofit philanthropic sector is absolutely baked into America's cultural DNA. People came to settle this country to create a sense of independence. You know, if you read de Tocqueville, which I'm sure most people have, and I always like it, there's one quote in there, I'll paraphrase it, where de Tocqueville, observing American society in early 1810 or whatever it was he was here, said, "These Americans are curious people." And I particularly liked it because a Frenchman was saying that about us. I thought that was appropriate because they still do say that. But the thing that was really substantive is that if they see a problem in their community, they form a committee of citizens to solve that problem without any redress or addressing the government. And that's what our nonprofit sector is. I'm all in favor of our government, of course, but what really makes American, in some ways, unique and special, and well, unique is better than special, but strong, is the fact that we still have that spirit of, let's get together ourselves and address that problem. Everybody here is doing that through the community foundations, through whatever you're doing in your community. And it's not big money, it's time, it's interest, and America's the envy of the world because of that. It really is. There's no other sector. They're trying to get them going in other places. You know, the UK has and Ireland have some pretty good philanthropic sector, but it's nothing like the American spirit. I mean, we can do just about everything our government can do in the way of services, education, health, whatever, in that nonprofit sector, and typically do it at a cost far below what it will be done at a tax revenue base, and constantly moving against the market, so innovating in it. That's what makes it so wonderful. And I just, you know, myself, both my parents were immigrants. They came here because of this, and so I think it's, you know, it's one of those things, though, if you don't support it, you could lose it.
So I want to bring our attention to just one piece that I read about in your description of your work over the years. And you have an organization that you've been working with that encourages corporate philanthropy. We have wonderfully generous businesses within our community. And I'd just like to hear how that got started, what its mission is, just what is the conversation that is taking place around encouraging corporate philanthropy.
Well, you want to hear the true story of how it started?
You want to hear the true story? Yeah, okay.
So one day Paul called me and he said, "Forrester, Ben Cohn, Ben and Jerry's, and I are going to go out and each are going to buy $250,000 of stock in a whole bunch of different companies, and then we're going to go to the CEO and we're going to rattle his cage and make him give more money away. What do you think?" I said, "Well, here, let's think about this, Paul. You got an ice cream maker that's bordering on being a communist and a social, a celebrity who's pretty left himself." And he said, "Yeah, you're right." He said, "Yeah, that's probably not a good idea, is it? So what do we do?" And I said, "Well, CEOs, they don't grow in some orchard called a CEO orchard. They're people. They come up in certain ways. They want to do more if you can help support that." So there are factors, the corporate community is not as generous as it used to be, but there are real factors that began to come into our business community in the 70s and really got heated up in the 80s and 90s that really pushed companies away from philanthropy. One of them is short-termism. How can you really give money away and be in this area if every quarter you have to get in front of analysts and explain to them your earnings? Philanthropy in corporations depends on a long-term view. So that was just one of the factors. So we put together a group. We had a wonderful meeting. We worked on this. I actually had my consulting company there. I paid for the beginning of it personally. And we decided we were at a point where we were going to test out our thinking of bringing CEOs together to encourage this. And we had a wonderful luncheon at a very exclusive club in New York. Not that we were members, but we got invited to it. And they had really well-known people, David Rockefeller, John Whitehead, who just passed away. They had a wonderful man, and Pete Peterson. And 201, Paul Volcker was there. They said, this is really important to do. So that really launched it as a forum to begin to create dialogue among CEOs, because even though corporate philanthropy is becoming more institutionalized inside corporations, the CEO still sets the tone and the direction. I have to tell you a funny thing that happened though. Everything's funny with Newman, but so at the end of the meeting, as it's breaking up, Ben Cohn came in with a backpack, what thing. He says, "Wait a minute," reaches in and comes out, and he's got a whole bunch of coupons for Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And he hands it out, and Dave Rockefeller was sitting next to me, and he gets it, he turns to the guy next to him, he said, "What is this?" And Ray said, "Well, that's, you'll get a free pint of ice cream." And David said, "If anybody doesn't want theirs." So that, I have all these life lessons. And one of the life lessons I have is I understood now that wealth also comes from being frugal.
Yes, right.
But that's how that began, and now it's really doing well. We are actually having bringing the program to all places, Italy in June, where the corporate sector wants to get involved in this, and Australia and other places. So companies are really, in many ways, big villages, and they can not just distribute money, but they can distribute values, as a village used to do. I'm hopeful. They're not there yet, but hopeful.
Well, we'll stay tuned and keep an eye on that.
Please do.
We will do that. So we want to just move on to just another part of the program, where we're going to be watching another short video where we're going to learn a little bit more about Paul's values and about how he looked at life. So if we could have that short video, that would be great.
Hello, I'm Paul Newman. I'm a pretty lucky fellow because I have a lot of passionate things in my life. I'm passionate about film, I'm passionate about fast cars, and I am passionate about my food products. I guess I am most passionate about the food products because the spaghetti sauce is probably better than most of my films, and more embarrassingly, it worldwide is outgrossing my films.
The food business literally got started because one Christmas I decided that Christmas presents to the neighbors, the bottle of wine and all that kind of stuff was just kind of passé. So I got some wine bottles and filled it up with salad dressing and took it to the neighbors for Christmas presents. And about the 1st of February, I got people knocking on my door saying, "Where is the second bottle?" That's the best bottle dressing on the market.
I agree with you. This is really very, very good. If you could act the way you could make salad dressing, you'd have a hell of a career.
Oh, God, wouldn't I?
Newman's Own is a very successful company. Do you have a business strategy? Was there
I don't think there was ever a business strategy except to say that we were going to try to provide stuff with the best possible ingredients that we could lay our hands on. And, being in the motion picture business didn't hurt. It gave us a leg up and name recognition right from the very beginning, and that was critical, I think.
But do you find people saying stick to what you do best?
Yes, a lot.
What do you say?
The motto of Newman's Own is to leave a bad taste in your mouth. I will now sing. Our popcorn makes you smile when you are suffering dyspepsia, and it will goose your appetite when you have anorexia. And as for those of you who like to scarf your popcorn in the sack, the good news is that Newman's Own contains an aphrodisiac.
actor, race car driver, food company executive, philanthropist? Is there anything that holds it all together?
Well, I'm a great believer in luck and the extraordinary role that plays in all of our lives. Good luck, bad luck, medium luck. And I think my interest in philanthropy is kind of a composite picture of all of that. I think of the possibility for the extraordinary luck that we've all had in our businesses. And I think if you were born in Papua New Guinea, for instance, the possibility for the extraordinary good fortune that we all live. You might be the owner of a fleet of dugout canoes, but that really would be all that circumstance would allow you to become. The luck of, genetic luck of being, having the ability of the reasoning, of deduction and induction that places you above the heads of the rest of your competitors. Being born in the right place, to the right kind of parents. I mean, all of those factors are significant in what we will be allowed to become.
I don't know. I mean, how long can a corporation last when it gives everything away? I mean, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting experiment.
The blend of corn that we have used will always be a mystery, but everything is natural to ward off flu and dysentery. And now to tell you with candor and with clarity that you should buy a lot because our profits go to charity.
And now we tell you finally with candor and with clarity.
What could be better than to hold your hand out to people who are less fortunate than you are? That's simply the way I look at it.
Well, there you go.
What could be better?
Not much.
Not much.
But you've really got a kind of insight into all the different parts of Paul, his sense of humor, which is, got some real good stories on that one, but we can't get into them.
We can't get into. And that whole piece of that serious fun, I just love that phrase.
Yeah.
Again, what does that mean? You know, how can we talk about that differently in our communities? Because we often think of it as being, you know, kind of uptight and serious about it, or we take ourselves too seriously. You and I talked a little bit about that. What is your perspective?
Well, you know, everybody experiences stress and difficult challenges. You know, certainly in Newman's Own, we have plenty of that, trying to compete with the big Unilevers and others. And but you saw it here, is that we don't take ourselves seriously. We take what we do seriously, and we constantly try to infuse our lives at Newman's Own with that spirit of you know, again, have fun in your life. Not giddy fun, but be satisfied with what you're doing. The phrase serious fun actually got coined with our camp, our first camp in Ireland, because when we went over there to try to get, you have a camp here called Camp Corey, which is one of our I shouldn't say our camps, but we were, Paul was founders of these, and we are heavily into financing them. But when we brought the practice of very sick children going to camp into a culture where camping meant putting something on the back of your car and driving to the beach, let alone sick children, we had to convince the medical community and others. The camps are just about having fun for the children, but then we wanted to make sure that the doctors and the parents knew it was serious business, and there's no reason why you can't, you know, combine the two of them. So it's not that, you know, you don't come into Newman's Own and all you hear is laughter and giggling and stuff like that, but there's plenty of that going on too. You know, things we do, and you know, but the biggest fun you really have is it's not so much fun as it is, you know, just feeling good about what you're able to do. And you know, I see the man with the hook is here, but
He is.
But if we're going to end this, I did want to say something about community foundations, if I could.
Okay.
In Hartford, Connecticut, where I grew up, we have the second oldest community foundation in the nation. And community foundations just, again, incredible expressions of America. And just the whole notion that it is community is just so brilliant. And I know here at the Puget Sound Community Foundation, it really works to bring people together. And the more you can come together collaborating as a community in your philanthropy through the form of a community foundation, I think it's just wonderful, because it's a distributor of information, it's a trusted ally and partner in what you're doing. Everybody's the same, doesn't matter how big your fund is or anything like that. So I'm a great proponent of community funds, and it was one of the great things that community foundations that got started in our country. So when Norma asked me to come 3,000 miles away 8 months ago, it sounded like a good idea. But what the real hook was really wanting to be anything I can do, literally with helping to promote the strength of community foundations. I really want to encourage you all to get involved. It's a wonderful, brilliant thing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So that concludes our interview piece here, but we would like to turn the mic back to our esteemed MC, Merritt, for some Q&A.
Great. Let's give it up to Norma, Bob. Thank you so much. What we're going to do now is open up for questions, and we're looking at about 10 minutes or so for that. We have microphones here in the front, and what I would like to ask you to do is, one, when you come up, raise your hand to be acknowledged to ask a question, and if you could state your name, your question, and if you have a particular person that you wanted to respond to the question, you can do that. And then even if you don't, if one of the persons who you didn't ask has a comment, he or she will make it. So how does that sound? Is that reasonable? Sure. Okay, cool. I think we have a question.
Yeah.
Mr. Charnley.
Hi, I'm Don Chalmers. I've been in the community for quite a long time. First, I want to thank Norma for a long service to our community through the Community Foundation. And second, I want to thank you, Bob, for presenting some foodstuffs that are much more palatable to me than other people have presented in other contexts, so thank you for that. The question I have for you is, you have to run a business. You've got a business operating, and you've talked about some overarching values, but I know you've got to stock the shelves. You've got to compete for shelving space. You've got to find purveyors to provide you the various foodstuffs that go into your products. How, in the context of that business element, are you maintaining the values that Paul talked about?
Well, it's a very good question, and we work at it. Not work is the wrong word, but it's constantly being put out there in so many different ways. So far, there are times when the food company, because of competitive pressures, wants to do something that at the end of the day I'll say no. I'll always explain why. And for the food people, so one of the things about Newman's Own, it's our food. We formulate it. It's not somebody else's recipe. We're not just merchandising our name. Well, if we took our brand and we started just merchandising it, we could make a great deal more money on a current basis, no doubt about it. How many, excuse me, perfumes and colognes are there out there named after some celebrity? They come and go. And they make a lot of money. But what I explained I shouldn't say explain it because it sounds like I'm sitting on Olympus talking down to these people we talk about, is really the durability of the brand, that it's really based on this sense of authenticity. So it's not about what we're doing this year. And we also constantly remind ourselves that our shareholders are the nonprofits, and they want us here for a long time. So we can afford to forego the easy money, but we have to take our risks. We just created a whole new brand. It's called Common Good. And so it's really good stuff, by the way, Common Good. We just came out with 5 new organic pasta sauce is under common good. And we had to go out and buy in advance of wondering whether or not this was going to work, 6 million pounds of tomatoes, these special tomatoes. And I told the CEO at that point, this better work or you're going to have one of the biggest tomato fights in the world coming on here. But we're moving around that. When we, in our hiring process with people, so many of our people who have skills in particular areas do the interviewing, and then they finally send them up to me, and I don't ask them anything about their skill sets. I'm really interested in who they are as people, their sense of humor, their values, and you can really, most of us can do this, particularly if you've been around long enough. There's a lot of intuition in it. We're fortunate we still have people at Newman's Own that knew Paul. But again, I just can't say that this will have worked in the future. I think it will when I'm not here. So far, we've stayed true to quality trumps profit and give it all away and creative chaos and don't take yourself seriously and all those other things.
Thanks, Bob.
Do the best we can.
We have another questioner in the queue, if you'd be so kind.
Please. Thank you so much for doing this. I just had a quick question, sort of to elaborate on that last question.
If you don't mind just sharing your name, please.
Oh, yes, I'm Kevin McCrae. I'm with the Evergreen State College, and our business class is here in the back.
Thank you.
Shout out to Kwame, the winner of the raffle, one of. Just out of curiosity, how do you decide how much money, how much of the profit goes into marketing? Because there must be a balance between, you could send all of your profits to the charity and to your cause, or you could take a portion of that and put it towards marketing the product, which will then reap more profit. How do you find that balance?
Well, we have to invest in the company, obviously. And it's a pretty difficult business to work if you're, at the end of the year, all the profits and royalties have to go away, that you can't build investment capital. So we have a very small marketing budget. Our entire marketing and advertising budget is much less than a category budget for another company. So what we look for are, where's our advantage in that area? Our advantage really is Newman's Own in our space, in the business space, is, and you can put this in real capital, the philanthropic brand. And what works for us also works for our grantees. They're telling our story. So they're getting that out. And other companies can't really do that. They can spend a lot of money in what's called cause marketing. Some of that's not bad, but some of it is, I find pretty shaky, because cause marketing, when you're just attaching, you say, okay, I'm going to pick that cause. Well, if that cause is not hitting your marketing dollars, you move to another cause, and you've dropped that nonprofit. So we stay on that authentic part. We have a board of directors. We present budgets. People are challenged on our team on the investments they want to make, why they want to make them. And so far, it hasn't been a problem. But I will say that right now in the food industry, it's a tough time. There's a lot of change going on. The big companies have decided to go to real food and away from chemistry for their products, which means they're coming into our space, which is a wonderful thing. They're moving away from additives and other stuff finally, and that puts a competitive pressure on us. End of the day, we simply can't compete on a dollar basis with Unilever and General Mills and others, and so we have to find other ways to do it. We do know that in the food business, you'll never sell food if it doesn't taste good, if it doesn't appeal to you, no matter what. But we do know that the trust in our brand really is very, very strong. It's beyond what you could find for dollars to promote that brand. So I'm not sure that's a good answer, but it's the best one I can give you right now. It's a real issue, though, because if we put $5 million more into marketing, that would be a huge amount of money for us, but it really couldn't make a dent going up against California Pizza Kitchen or something like that, who's one of our major competitors, or That's what
Thank
it
you.
is. Thank you.
Come
You
on
want
up,
a job
please.
at our food company? You can come and help.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Katya Miltimore. I'm the Executive Director for Boys and Girls Clubs here at Thurston County.
Wonderful.
And I had a question more related to your opinions on funding certain initiatives and nonprofits as a philanthropist and as a funder. So there is an emerging conversation about talent philanthropy.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Talent philanthropy. And so what that is all about is basically funding talent that runs nonprofits. So really investing in overhead. And that's a little bit of a change in direction among some funders, thinking about, there isn't really such a thing as overhead. It's more about funding talent that powers the mission.
Right.
So those of us that are in development, or those of us who are in marketing, or those of us that are not directly in programs, we're still advancing the mission of our organizations. Right. And without us, it's a question. How would the organization survive? But it is an emerging conversation in philanthropy, and I was wondering what your foundation, maybe what your thoughts on that were.
It's a good question, and again, being on the other side of the desk, if you will, most of my career, it's interesting. In business, you call it operating expenses. You go to a nonprofit, and people will call it overhead, which are, well, overhead. We've always been, strong believers that, and we actually look at how a nonprofit is investing in its G&A and its fundraising and other things, because we don't want to be donating our money to an organization that is not taking care of that money. And it's a business. It costs money to get into it. Now, there's increasing interest in doing that in the nonprofit community. The Charity Navigator and the Better Business Bureaus finally come out and said, wait a minute, all of these percentages you've been talking about are silly. They don't really work. People would say if you're spending more than 10% on your operating expenses, it's really bad. Well, that's not true. Everything's a different situation. If you're making an investment in a nonprofit and you want to take a look at it, you can understand it as a business and whether or not it's investing smartly. Now, occasionally something will happen. There was recently, without mentioning the name, but a big, veterans organization that had a really great, compelling name and was able to raise money far beyond the need that they were trying to fill at the time. And they began to get very extravagant. And unfortunately, when that happens, they fired the CEO and everything. That tends to pollute the water for everybody else, other than those of us who are in the field and understand. So I think, again, a community foundation is a great place, and we have community foundations all over our country, to help educate the community on how to understand these issues. If a nonprofit's not investing sufficiently, we question it. And we actually, our money, as much of our money goes into what's called in building sustainability and capacity as opposed to running the program. We're not, we build development offices. We invest in those. We build financial systems and technology with our money. So I hope that's, I thought you'd appreciate that.
Norma, if you'd be so kind, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on that question as well. And the next person who might have a question, if you could make your way over this side or that side. We have about 3 more minutes or so for questions. But Norma, if you had any additional comments, or I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that.
Well, at the community foundations, in the community foundation sector, that's been a question for many years, and we have started moving in the direction probably over the last 5 of being able to fund some of those pieces that really build the infrastructure, because I think we do understand, like you're talking about, Bob, that if you're not putting money back into the organization, then the organization itself doesn't grow. So we're fairly selective about how we can do that just because of resources, but we do hold to the fact that you have to do it. So we funded some things, in strategic planning and helping more staff come on, in education, continuing education that otherwise there might not be dollars for. And so I would definitely say that the question is an important one, and the answer is even more important. And it means literally, if we're going to have a strong sector across our region, then we have to grow the business.
You know, I'd like to add a corollary to that the funder, Community Foundations Newman Zone, also has an opportunity, you know, for me it's also a responsibility, to challenge the nonprofit when it comes to, not in a way that's, you know, adversarial, but many of us know nonprofits tend to be horizontal. They're not driven by that profit motive. They're driven by other wonderful imperatives. And they tend not to merge and do other things that businesses do. So one of the things we'll do is when we're looking at funding a nonprofit in this area, we'll check the landscape and say, who else is doing this? And can you create better efficiencies by beginning to combine some of your administrative and overhead? So I think the funder dialogue has to be one of an investor, a real enlightened investor, that we want to help you. And by saying that, that means if I come in and we do this all the time and say, listen, one of the things I'm concerned about is your board of directors consists of you, your daughter, your son, your accountant, your lawyer, and your PR person. I'm not very confident in that.
Sure.
And they, you know, everybody. So, but you do that in a way that is constructive, not adversarial. Understanding that there are life cycles inside nonprofits, and they go from their founders up to something else. And I wish more funders would do that. And by the way, I wish more funders would hire development officers to come in and help them, because development officers, they know how to do this stuff, you know? They're the ones explaining the nonprofit to the outside world and the outside world to the nonprofit. So.
We're going to have, this will be our last question, and then following that, Bob and Norma will have 5 minutes to make any concluding comments that they want to make before Stacy D comes up and brings us home. So, question, please.
Great. Again, thank you very much. My name is Marty Juergens. I'm actually a board member of the Community Foundation. And you've talked a lot about legacy and what Paul believed, mission beyond his passing. So I had two questions. One is, I know he has children. Are any of his children part of this foundation? And what was his beliefs of how to pass, you know, what his belief about luck and giving back to the future generations?
Well, it's a good question. Paul, whoop, I'm unmiked. The technology is not going to work. Paul always thought of Newman Zone as being for the public trust. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about the Newman family. We have one of Paul's daughters serves on the board on a year-to-year appointment. And that's really done. I wanted to make sure that we continue a connection. But also, we own Paul's image. We own, outside of Newman Zone, we own his name outside of Newman Zone, his signature and other things. And while Joanne is alive in particular, that just didn't seem right to me, that there was not a family relationship there. Without going into the details, which I can't do, Paul was very generous in his own estate in setting up foundations for each of his daughters outside of his personal, this was his personal wealth. He never considered Newman Zone his, even though it was his. And when Joanne passes away, they will have very good foundations. We've helped them in terms of having them participate in some of our grant-making programs to help them understand the grant-making process. So that's where we stand on that. There was a second part of the question. I'm missing that again. Right. So, well, the next generation in Paul's family. What I'm doing now is we're really reaching out to Paul's two grandchildren, Peter and Henry. Peter's will go into his sophomore year at Middlebury, and Henry's going to graduate from high school. And not to come work at the foundation, but to get out and work with the nonprofits. It always bothers me if somebody comes into a grant-making place and they really haven't been out in the trenches, if you will. So we're doing that through some programs we have. But each person is individual. Paul is a person who didn't believe in inherited wealth. Other people are okay with that. He just didn't believe in it. But he did believe in philanthropy. And his estate, his personal estate, is set up so that through various charitable trusts and foundations, all of his personal estate, in addition to Newman's own, will end up going to charity. And the foundations have a spend-out clause in them. We can't have a spend-out because we're earning the money every year. But if we were an endowed foundation, he absolutely would have put a spend-out requirement inside the foundation. That was just his philosophy. Hope that helps. Thank you. Thank you.
So in closing, we just want to take a couple of minutes to say again, thank you, Bob, for being here today, for the generosity of the Newman's Foundation, for you being here. There's a lot of product here tonight, and that is about the Newman's Own Foundation providing that for us, and we're thankful for that.
Our pleasure.
I specifically and especially want to say thank you to all of the organizations, the businesses, the individuals that have supported this event tonight. Heritage Bank, and on the back of your program is that listing of the wonderful sponsors that has made this possible, and we're really grateful for that. And on the behalf of the Board of Directors, thank you to the audience, to Bob for being here, and I just would like to ask if there's anything you would like to say in closing.
Well, thank you for inviting me out. It's, to be able to come into a community and be with people in the community thinking this way is really, you asked me earlier several times, where do I get my satisfaction and optimism is, it's here, it's not sitting at, other places in big forum, and it's in a community like this, and thank you for all you're doing, and particularly the nonprofits out there for your great work and your sacrifice, and keep it up.
Thank you.
Yep.
As promised, Stacy D.
Are you going to stay here, Merritt?
Sure.
All right.
I'll be your bodyguard.
Is this good? I was asked to share with you a few final thoughts about philanthropy. And the easiest way for me to do that is to share with you a very brief description of my own path in philanthropy. And the funny thing is, I was less confused about it when I had less. After I finished graduate school and got my first job, I wasn't earning very much, but I had a budget, I knew exactly what I had to pay my bills, and I knew what I had left over. It was really obvious what I had to share. After I started earning more, the amount of my income increased, things became less clear. In fact, the more I earned, the fuzzier it got. At one point, I knew that I could write those $100 checks to fundraisers. But it felt arbitrary. But it also felt like it wasn't enough. I knew I could do more, I knew I could write bigger checks, but it felt kind of irresponsible because I wasn't really sure. I was still confused. Fortunately, I experienced a number of revelations after that. By revelations, I mean realizations about what's true and what's not true. In the interest of time, I'm just going to share briefly 3 revelations that helped me to achieve clarity regarding philanthropy. My first revelation occurred 5 years ago when I met a woman named Lynn Twist. She was at an event. She's an international fundraiser. She's a philanthropist, and I met her at a gathering that was co-sponsored by this community foundation. At the event, Lynn asked each of the participants a simple question. She said, "What do you stand for?" And at first, I was really puzzled. And then when I realized that I had to answer this question in front of a group of people I didn't know, I panicked. So I deconstructed her question in my head, and I thought, okay, what makes me stand up and pay attention? What makes me take action? It was at that moment that I realized that what I value most is dignity. My belief that every person, every creature, and everything in our natural world is entitled to honor and to respect. And until then, I admired the organizations that supported education, social needs, and basic needs for people. I supported organizations that protected the integrity of our natural world, but I didn't know why I felt that way. It was a revelation. Revelation number 2. That occurred about 2 years ago when another mentor asked me to do 2 things. I told her I was constantly worried about, was I going to have enough when I retire? Am I going to be able to make it in my life? Firstly, she asked me to put together a net worth statement. Secondly, she asked me to put together a projection of what I'm going to have in terms of assets, income, and expenses when I retire. She made it clear that she wasn't going to help me. She set a deadline, and she forced me to personally examine where I was and what I truly needed. And you know what? After I put that net worth statement together and that retirement projection, which by the way was not as daunting as I thought it would be, I discovered that I am going to be A-OK. I'm not, and I never will be, Bill Gates by any measure, but my worry over what I will have, whether I will have enough when I retire, it instantly vanished after I did those 2 spreadsheets. The media and our consumer-based culture do a very good job of making people think that there's not enough and that more is better. We're inundated every day by messages that enable us to think that it's good to acquire and to keep as much as we can. But the problem with that thinking is, more is better, is that we never achieve it. And so we start to feel, it makes people feel inadequate on some level. It's impossible to satisfy that if that is the goal. And it's not just about money, it's about everything. We don't have enough time, we don't have enough sleep, that's me. We don't have enough, we're not smart enough, but insufficiency around finances is a big one, and it can be destructive. But my revelation was to discover my own sufficiency. I realized that there is enough, that I have enough, and that I am enough. Not only that, but I realized that I have enough to share, a lot more than what I had been sharing. I've made a few changes with my personal approach to philanthropy. One of the changes I've made has to do with those $100 checks. They're now $500 checks. And when I write those checks, it's not arbitrary, it's intentional. It feels great. It feels amazing knowing that my actions have a greater impact on what matters to me. I have a long way to go. I've made some other changes, but that revelation, knowing that I'm sufficient, it's been transformational. Revelation number 3, it was my discovery of the universal truth, a universal truth. And the truth is that everybody wants everybody else to be A-OK. Not just our families, not just our friends. We want everyone to be okay. We want everyone to have good food, safe shelter, a quality education, to enjoy and appreciate the arts, to breathe fresh air, to be treated with kindness, and to be connected with one another. What else would explain the success of crowdfunding? Before we invented money, there was reciprocity. Reciprocity was the original currency. People simply took care of one another. Let's take care of one another. And in particular, let's take care of the fellow members and resources of our communities, our own tribes. For me, what is great about the Community Foundation is that every investment that the Community Foundation makes is deeply important to me. Every scholarship, every initiative, every grant that this organization deploys supports my core values of dignity and connectedness. Please join me in supporting the Community Foundation. There's a number of ways you can do this. The easiest thing you can do is make a financial gift, but don't stop there. Continue to attend the community and educational forums convened by this organization. Schedule an appointment with Norma Schuiteman to ask her questions or to explore establishing a community foundation fund just like Merritt Long and Marcia Tadano Long did. If you're not sure where you are in terms of philanthropy, figure out what you need to do so that you are sure. Deeply examine where you stand and what you stand for, and then figure out what you can do to promote that. I promise you that you will not regret it. Thanks for supporting the Community Foundation by attending this event tonight. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Norma. Thank you, Merritt. Thank you, Marcia, for being mentors in philanthropy. And thank you, SOGO, Nature Nurtures Farm, Chehalis River Basin Land Trust, Concern for Animals, Senior Services of South Sound, and Host for being architects behind the health and the happiness and the well-being of our community. Thanks again for being here tonight.
All right, good job. I'd like to get a copy of that if you don't mind. Thanks for coming. Good night.